Okay, I think we should start. Welcome, everybody, to today's webinar. We are discussing dealing with parents, very exciting and somewhat sensitive topic, but I think going to be really rewarding. Today's discussion is bringing parents back into partnership, a neuroscience approach to difficult conversations. And I will quickly share my screen with you. So, as I said, bringing parents back into partnership, also in partnership today with Connections in Mind. I'm Stephanie Hobler, CEO and founder of Teach Up. Some of you may already know Teach Up because you already do the training in school. If not, I shall tell you a very little bit about it as we want to get right into the topic. And then joining me today is our guest speaker, Victoria Bagnall, who's co-founder and director of Connections in Mind. And I'm really excited to have her here today. Actually, Victoria and I met at an event in London and sort of got chatting about all things safeguarding and parents and well-being, and we obviously kept in touch. And one thing we discussed in safeguarding was when I speak to schools and I speak to head teachers, HR, TAs, everybody across the board, is that having those difficult conversations with parents can be incredibly challenging. And not only that, in an international setting, whether that's an international school or a bilingual school, it can be even more tricky. You're dealing with obviously cross-cultural issues, and it can be often tricky, in a fee-paying school. It adds a whole other layer of complexity to dealing with sort of parents and difficult topics. I myself, a former teacher, know what that's like, and it can be really, sort of uncomfortable trying to, share your thoughts or professional feedback with those parents, but also being mindful of, the reputation of the school, and also the feelings of parents. So I firsthand know how difficult it is to have these conversations with parents. So I'm really looking forward to hearing Victoria's insights and tips that you can put in practice today. Quickly about Teach Up. If you don't know Teach Up, we are a online bilingual professional learning platform. So we primarily offer bilingual CPD certified safeguarding training. And what's exciting about the training is that it's has been developed basically to specific cultural contexts. So if you're one of our teachers from China, you know that we have a China-specific suite of courses featuring Chinese regulations, and of course, most importantly, offering all of our suite of courses in also simplified Chinese. I know this really, is such, I think, a positive addition to whole school training, because obviously we're not just training teaching staff and leadership, we're training everybody in the school, because as we know, safeguarding, training the whole school is absolutely key to the safety and well-being of your students and also staff. We also provide teaching and learning training, which is very exciting. It's not launched yet, but due, I think, in just after Chinese New Year, so that's the end of Feb, is our teaching masterclass courses. And these will be behaviour for learning, adaptive teaching, supporting neurodivergent students, and working memory, which is actually sort of quite a modern topic and really exciting, created by our wonderful partner, Joanne Robinson. So watch this space, very exciting. We'll send you more information. And then finally, we provide training for adults working with children. So not just educators, but those working in organisations. So if you haven't discovered Teach Up, then we can send you some information afterwards. And please feel free to ask questions. And of course, we're happy to give you a login and a free trial. And I will now very happily hand over to Victoria. I will let Victoria introduce herself. There's no point me doing it. She can tell you about the wonderful work that she does, and we'll engage throughout the session.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Stephanie. It's such a pleasure to be here with you all today. And without further ado, I'm going to share my screen and get started on the slide stick. So we're going to be covering bringing parents into partnership, a neuroscience approach to difficult conversations today. And we're going to be using menti.com for this presentation. So please do scan the QR code on the screen, or you can also click on the link that we're going to pop into the chat as well. So I think Stephanie, I think you might have the link that we can pop into the chat. If not, we can just use the QR code on the screen, or we can go to
Yep.
menti.com. So once you've done that, you should get access to the interactive element of today. It will deepen your learning and understanding because you're going to be co-creating some of the slides that I'm going to be speaking to today. So that's always great fun, but also it helps with your learning as well. Super. So the first interactive slide today is for you to pin on the map where you are joining from today. So you should just on your Mentimeter be able to pin on the map where you're joining from. And then that will give us an idea of where we've got people joining from today, hopefully from across the globe. But I know that there's specific kind of Asia and Australasia focus today as well. So let's just see who we've got. Fantastic. Super. Wonderful to see. It's always quite fun. I'm a geographer, so I just love seeing where people are calling in from and the amazing technology. I don't think I could have ever imagined as a child that would be able to be sitting in my living room, speaking to people from across the world about my specialist interest. So how about that? Fantastic. Super. So let's see, we've got a few people from the Middle East. We've got people from Malaysia, from across China, and other areas of Asia and India. Just fantastic to see that we've got so many people joining us from across the world. So thank you so much for sharing that. I could just stay here and stare at this all day, but I think we're going to move on with the rest of the presentation. So, just a bit of a summary of what we're going to be covering today. We're going to be looking at how human brains respond to threats and what this means for our relationships with parents, and how a three-step approach grounded in compassion can help. And also, we're going to be covering further training and professional development because my magic wand, unfortunately, is a bit broken. And whilst I can introduce you to the topic today, really cementing that expertise does take time. And so, I'm happy to support that over the longer term. What you'll take away from today is a clear explanations that you can share with your colleagues, a lens to reframe some of the challenging behaviours and patterns we see from parents, practical strategies to work with parents, and a more compassionate approach to parent understanding and human behaviour. Okay, so a little bit of an introduction to me and why I'm here speaking to you today. So my name is Victoria Bagnall and I am neurodivergent. I'm dyslexic, but despite that, I did manage to get to the University of Cambridge and I'm a qualified secondary geography teacher. I'm also a mother of three gorgeous girls who are all neurodivergent too, and the founder of an organisation called Connections in Mind, who I'm speaking on behalf of today, and another organisation called The Code, which offers executive function aware tutoring too. I'm one of the trustees of the Learning Skills Trust and also an advisor of the Divergent Schools Group. I've just founded an international professional body which accredits executive function coaching globally, which is very exciting. And I've written a book, which is going to be published this summer called The Neuro Inclusive Educator. So I'm a busy lady, lots on. So I always start these talks by telling a little bit about my passion for this subject because I think it's always nice to know why someone is so interested in these things, and it helps us to kind of ground the story in our long-term memory. So I talked to you about my light bulb moment. My light bulb moment is for us at Connections in Mind, the moment when we find out about how the brain really works, especially around our executive functioning and our prefrontal cortex and how that interplays with our emotions. And that kind of helps us to understand so much more about ourselves as humans, but also those around us as well. So I'm going to tell you about my light bulb moment now. So because I'm neurodivergent, I really struggled in my early adulthood because I'd had so much negative feedback when I was growing up that I was lazy and disorganized and just generally not a good enough human being, that it really impacted my mental health. And so when I was a young adult, I really struggled with my mental health. I experienced depression, anxiety, and at times suicidal ideation. I really felt like this lady going round in circles in my thoughts and my feelings and struggling to find the light at the end of the tunnel. But I'm glad to say that since my light bulb moment, since I've learned more about how my brain actually works and why I find some things difficult, and it's not because I'm lazy and disorganized and not a good enough human. In fact, I'm just a normal human that struggles with these things as we all do, then I can be much kinder to myself. And my light bulb moment happened when I was working alongside a young lady from hospital because she'd been hospitalized for her mental health to keep her safe. And I was supporting her to take her A levels from hospital. And I was working in partnership with the psychiatrist there. And it transpired that this young lady had got the highest ever score in the thinking skills assessment for Oxford University. So I think we'll all agree that she was very intelligent. But she really struggled with basic things like keeping her belongings organized, organizing her thoughts on paper, doing her homework, writing essays, doing any kind of revision, and managing her time. And it just seemed really bizarre that someone so intelligent could struggle with what society sees as basic things. So I said to the psychiatrist, I said, I just don't understand it. Can you help me understand? She said, well, I suggest you read this book, and I recommend it on to all of you as well, Smart But Scattered Teens. It's a fantastic book, which helps us to understand more about executive functioning and the prefrontal cortex and why some children find these things difficult. And it just really helped me to understand this young lady so I could support her better. But it also helped me to understand why I had struggled with these things and continue to struggle with these things, even though they seemed to be quite basic skills. And so because I can be quite impulsive sometimes, jumped on a plane after I'd finished reading this book and went to America and met up with one of the authors of this book, Peg Dawson, who was holding a training with PESI, which is a psychological training organization that's highly regarded over in America. And I took her out for lunch and I said, Peg, please come to England. We need what you know about executive functioning in the UK. And that was 10 years ago now. And I haven't looked back, not for a moment, because I now have a better understanding of why I struggle with certain things and I can be kinder to myself about that. So, at Connections in Mind, we know that the knowledge that we have about how the brain actually works can help us to be kinder to ourselves and those around us, and that has the power to literally change the world. So many of the things and the problems that we face as societies at the moment are because we don't really understand the human condition and what it is to be a human and how our brains and our bodies interact. And so this training is part of that understanding today, but also we offer all sorts of other wonderful things to help change the world. So, I want to talk about parent-school relationships today because they're absolutely foundational. So, you may be aware of a meta-analysis. It was completed in 2014. A meta-analysis where they look at all the data, all the research that has been done, and they select the highest quality data and look at these overarching trends. And what they found is that the relationship between parental involvement and academic achievement was consistent across grade levels, so across different year groups and ethnic groups. So we know absolutely unequivocally that parent relationships and that involvement in academic work is absolutely foundational to outcomes in education. I've also gone through and done a bit of a literature review for you all as well, and looking at what works. Okay, so communication is absolutely key. Regular two-way, not just you telling them, but them also telling you, clear, accessible, and informal is really important. Then there's the relational climate. Is there a sense of trust and respect and positive attitudes both ways between both the parents and the teachers? Then there's the involvement and goals, that homeschool participation, shared expectations, our parents brought into concert with what we're trying to achieve in the school setting. And finally, it's about structures and time, making sure that leadership prioritizes parent relationships, that the systems are in place for that, that there is time made available for teachers to invest their time in that, and that the school has a culture of being really welcoming to parents and bringing them into the community so that they feel a sense of belonging and a part of what the school can offer. So this next few sections is, well, in fact, the whole talk actually is based on a chapter of my forthcoming book, The Neuro-Inclusive Educator. And in that book, we have a look at how parent relationships and partnerships impact children. So we're going to just go through the 5 stages of engagement now. So stage 1, this is the one that we really want to go for. It's that collaborative partnership. There's high trust, shared language and goals. There's emotional safety and mutual respect. And for the child who's experiencing this collaborative partnership, they experience consistency, emotional safety, and a strong sense of being supported by a united team. And that's what we want for all the children in our settings. Now, stage 2 is that warm but passive. And this, I think, is what most schools probably, if they're realistic, will say they have, where it's polite and transactional in communication. There's a limited but shared understanding. It's calm on the surface, but gaps in that partnership can emerge. And so for the child, it can feel calm but a bit disjointed. And sometimes the needs of the child go unnoticed or unshared. So it's much more transactional at that stage 2. Then at stage 3, there's this development of tension and mistrust. So there's miscommunications and unmet needs. Conversations tend to be more emotionally charged. Assumptions about their intentions are made by teachers and the other way around as well. So parents making assumptions about teachers' intentions too. Repair is absolutely possible at this stage, in fact, at every stage, but it is effortful. It does take a lot of investment. So we want to try and keep them in that collaborative partnership as much as we can and avoid getting into this tension and mistrust because it can take time to heal that divide. But most importantly, for the child in this stage, there's this growing uncertainty that's reflected in behavior, emotion, and engagement. So, what's actually happening is that breakdown of trust between the parent and the school is impacting the behavior of the child. So, it's making it more difficult to manage that child within the school environment. And often, I think when we look at children who are struggling within the school setting, we can see that that relationship between the parents and the school is also tense as well. And the one feeds into the other, they cannot be separated out. Stage 4 is when things get defensive and adversary. Communication is reactive, formal, and sometimes mediated. Policies and procedures and escalations happen quite regularly, and both sides feel exhausted, hurt, and unheard. But for the child caught in the middle of this, there's heightened anxiety, a lot of shame, because often they internalize it and think that they're the cause of these breakdowns in relationship, and they sometimes withdraw, and they feel caught in the middle. They love their parents and they want to do well at school, but they find really difficult that there's that conflict going on between the two. And then finally, we've got stage 5. Stage 5 is the breakdown of trust, where partnership collapses and communication is minimal or legalized, so through solicitors. A child might be out of school and educators feel constrained. Families feel they must fight to be heard. So for the child in this situation, there's a sense of profound isolation, a loss of belonging, and their approach to learning is replaced by this survival mode that they become into. So it's very damaging and harmful for a child, for parents to be in this kind of relationship with the school. So in summary, strong parent relationships impact outcomes. So it's absolutely essential that we invest time and effort in building strong parent relationships. Collaborative partnerships are best for children where we work together with parents in concert and have that high trust environment. But when relationships break down, it impacts child development and their behavior. So it's harmful for those children from a safeguarding perspective. It's something we should avoid at all costs. So I want you to think of some of the relationships which brought you to this training today. Which trouble you the most? Which are the ones that trouble you the most? And think, which stage are they at? This is confidential information, so don't worry, this won't be shared with anyone else. But it'd be really interesting just to have your reflections on Mentimeter. Which stage do you think they're at? Okay, very interesting. So we've had the first kind of 10 in. We've got about 40 or so people on Mentimeter. Please, if you're not on Mentimeter already, please do join. You should be able to click on the link in the chat, which Stephanie, I'm sure, can repost again. Very, very interesting to see that stage 2, stage 3, mostly stage 4, and sometimes into that stage 5 as well. And that is really important to remember how that's impacting the child. Okay, so I'm sure that's not something we're not aware of, but I think it's something that's important to remember, so that we make sure that we are supporting those relationships as much as we possibly can. And I'm going to get on to the rest of my presentation, thinking about how we can reframe our understanding of the parents' behaviour and come back into partnership with them, and give you some strategies to work on that. Okay, so
I don't understand.
sorry,
Hey, so I'm sure that's
my Siri just decided to switch itself on. I must have said something that sounded like Siri. I do apologize. So let's move on to difficult conversations. So difficult conversations are something that we all have to face as educators, and as adults for that matter. And difficult conversations are any exchange that feel emotionally charged, uncertain, or risky, where something important is on the line and we're not sure how to say it or how it will be received. Now, difficult conversations feel hard. We feel them, they feel difficult, they feel challenging. There's lots of emotions involved, and they can be almost paralyzing as well. And this is driven by fear. So often we fear inadvertently hurting someone with what we have to say, feeling guilty for causing this discomfort that they're going to be feeling because we have to deliver some bad news. There's a fear of being misunderstood, that our good intentions, that which always, as teachers, we always come to these conversations with absolutely brilliant intentions for the child, might be misunderstood. And again, that we might further damage that relationship that might be teetering on the edge of a stage 3 or a stage 4. But it's really important to remember, and I think it's, as a teacher myself, and as a professional working in this area, having now had the training that I've had in difficult conversations, I realize how underskilled I was as a teacher. And most of us have not had formal training in how to have these difficult conversations, and it really is a skill. So in summary, difficult conversations feel hard. We feel that emotion in our bodies. And we often fear the outcomes of those conversations and feel ill prepared for these difficult conversations. So now we're going to get on to some neuroscience. Do not worry, I'm going to keep it very basic, but it's really important for understanding of what's going on for parents when we're trying to support them. So in Connections in Mind, we focus on our specialist area of interest is on our prefrontal cortex and our executive functioning. So the prefrontal cortex is the part of our brain that helps us to think before we act. It's like the air traffic control center of our brain. It helps us to organize our thoughts. It helps us to organize our time, our belongings, and is really that kind of higher order part of the brain. But we also have a part of our brain called our called our amygdala, which is our threat detector. It's where we act before we think. So if our amygdala senses any type of threat, whether real or perceived, it pushes the prefrontal cortex offline and prioritizes our survival. And that's a really important part of understanding how our brains are functioning. So I'm going to show you this hand model of the brain, which is really useful to use in training, but also when we're speaking to students, and just to help us to really cement this understanding by doing some physical activity around it. So put your hand up like this for me, please. I'm just going to stop my screen share for a second because it's always better if you can actually see the full thing. So you put your hand up like this and you fold your thumb across the palm of your hand, and then you'll find there's a knobbly bit of your thumb that sticks out. That's your amygdala there. Then you've got your cortex and your prefrontal cortex. So this is the rational thinking, choice-making part of our brains. And this is our amygdala, where our threat detector, it's constantly scanning our environment for any type of threat. So what happens is, If we're feeling safe and we're content, we have our whole brain state, we can make decisions, we can have difficult conversations calmly, and we can go about our everyday practice in a way that feels safe and comfortable, and everything seems to be going well. So that's what happens for us most of the time when we're kind of in a good place. But if our amygdala senses any type of threat, whether real or perceived, we flip our lid and our prefrontal cortex is neurologically disconnected from the rest of our brain. And our amygdala prioritizes our survival responses, which we'll go through in a minute. Now, it's really important to note that because these are survival responses to flip the lid, it happens in milliseconds. It's not a choice that we're making. We're not considering, oh, should I flip my lid or not? The amygdala is prioritizing those survival responses. So it takes milliseconds for that to happen. And it takes on average around 20 minutes for that prefrontal cortex to come back online again once we feel safe. Okay, so it takes quite a long time. Cortisol is coursing through our body. There's all sorts of other hormones involved as well. And it's difficult for our amygdala to let go of the fact there was a threat and allow that prefrontal cortex to come back online. So that's absolutely foundational understanding for what we're going to be talking about today. So here are the survival responses. They're called the 5 Fs. Some people know them as the 3 Fs, but I'm going to add a couple of extra ones for you too. So the first one is fight. So we all know that response, one gets physically or verbally aggressive, okay? So that is that fight response. We become defensive. Then we have a flight response, which is where we literally run away. We avoid the situation. So we might physically walk away, or we just might avoid talking about the thing that's difficult, but that's that flight response. Then we have that freeze response, which is where we clam up and we just can't think of the right words to say at that moment. Then we've got our fawn response. So you'll see this a lot of times with parents and with children. A fawn response is when somebody is very forceful, perhaps in the way that they communicate, and a person flips into that compliance mode and they're complying with the threat. So you often see this when if we raise our voices with children and we see them kind of shift into that compliance mode. They're not self-regulating, they are becoming dysregulated actually, but they're flipping into that fawn mode. And with parents, what we see is when they're very agreeable in the meeting and they say yes to everything and seem to be going along with what you're saying. But once they get back home and their prefrontal cortex comes back online, they're like, I'm not so sure if I'm happy with this. But in the moment, they've complied with what you were asking for them to do. And then finally, we've got an extreme response, which is the flop response. Now, we see this a lot with young people in the early years when perhaps they didn't get the blue cup and they really wanted the blue cup. Instead, they got the green cup and they fall to the floor in emotion. They're overwhelmed with their emotion. But also we can see that in parents as well, and in adults when something really terrifying has happened and we faint. And we're overwhelmed by emotion, and that our body responds in that flop response as well. There's also a really important concept called neuroception, which is the understanding that our entire body and nervous system is subconsciously processing and evaluating signals from our environment that we're safe, that we're in danger, or that we can kind of engage socially. So that's constant information that's coming from us to us. Now, if we're in an interaction with parents where we are in a heightened state of survival state, we're in our kind of defensive fight mode, maybe, or maybe we're in kind of an avoidance mode, we're in a flight mode, they will be able to pick up on that, and that will put them into a defensive or survival mode as well. So we really need to be very aware of the fact that our behavior and the way that we're feeling will also be impacting parents as well, because they're constantly they as humans are constantly evaluating the environment. Am I safe here? Can I relax? Can I engage? Not as that they're not consciously doing it, it's totally subconscious that it's happening. And when the nervous system detects a threat, the prefrontal cortex goes online. So that's where the executive functions are housed, our abilities to think rationally, to make choices, to manage our time, to manage our emotions, to be reflective. All of that goes offline. And we prioritize those survival responses. But also we know from our work and from the literature is that all of these things can impact that as well. So if a parent isn't feeling safe, as we've said already, then their prefrontal cortex will be online. But if they're not looking after themselves, if they haven't done recent exercise, if they're not feeling connection, if they're not feeling supported by the school, if they're not feeling supported by their spouse or their family, if they haven't had much fun recently or experienced joy, if they haven't experienced calm moments doing yoga or mindfulness or a walk in nature, if they haven't slept well recently, and if they haven't eaten recently, all of this will impact their ability to access that more rational part of their brain where they're going to have that really constructive partnership conversation with you. So we need to be aware of that too. But most importantly, what we need to remember is that parental instincts to protect their children are extremely strong. So whilst we have strong instincts to protect ourselves, those survival responses, as parents, that extends to our children too. So if we feel that our child is under threat in any way, then we'll be straight into those survival modes. And again, not engaging that rational thinking part of our brain. So I want to know those kind of stage 4, stage 5 relationships that we had on the previous slides. What kind of behaviors have you experienced from parents that unsettled you? What kind of fight type responses, flight type responses, freeze responses, maybe some fawn responses, and maybe some flop responses have you experienced? So you might have experienced shouting, you might have experienced physical aggression, you might have experienced someone who walked away from you. What have you experienced? And this will, once you've typed it in, so we've experienced that flight response where someone disappears from the situation or kind of checks out of that conversation. Yes. What other parental behaviors have you experienced? Let's have a look. Anger. Yeah. Really angry. And often that anger, it comes from a place of they're feeling threatened and they become very defensive. Complete denial. Yeah, because it's too scary for the brain to recognize that this has happened. Denial is like a flight response, right? They're checking out of this situation. They're completely denying. Blaming, again, that's that fight response, isn't it? That defensiveness, that blame. Humiliation. Yeah, they're going to try again. If they're in that fight response, they're going to try and humiliate you or put you down to make themselves feel better, feel more in control of the situation. Again, this is not a conscious choice that they're making. This is an instinctual reaction that they're having to being under threat. Shouting and insults and anger, fight, withdrawal. Again, that's that kind of freeze response, that fawn response, complete disagreement and defensiveness. Yes. Defensiveness and blame, angry and fighting, deflection. Again, that's that flight response, isn't it? Pushing it away. Emotional discharge and threats. Again, that's that fight response, isn't it? So we can see coming through here, all of these experiences that we're seeing are all quite understandable when you can understand what's happening in the brain of the parent. So what's happening is their child is under threat, and their prefrontal cortex is disconnected from the rest of their brain. So they're in those survival responses, and their amygdala has kind of taken charge of the responses. And you're getting these instinctive responses, and they come from a long history of that parent and how they have managed to keep themselves safe in the past. But they're not a conscious, rational choice that parent is making in that moment. I think that's really important for us to remember. And we've seen some flop responses as well. Yes, I've seen it culturally. It's very in different cultures, there's very different reactions. But I spend a lot of time in Africa and the Middle East, and we can see kind of often parents kind of exhibiting those kind of flop responses that perhaps we wouldn't do so much in the UK. And that is just a cultural difference. And that's really interesting to see that as well. Super. Filing a report to upper management, again, that's the fight response, isn't it? I'm going to take you on. I'm going to make you feel bad. And that's the kind of behaviors that we're seeing. So when we can reframe these kind of parent behaviors as survival responses, that they are protecting themselves and their children, we can begin to understand what's going on for them and hopefully move into compassion. So when we sense any type of threat, we experience instinctual responses. Our rational, collaborative brain is offline. Parents' instinct is to protect their children, and it's extremely strong. And this can result in challenging behavior. But you'll be glad to know that there is a way forward from here. So at Connections in Mind, all the work that we do revolves around 3 steps. There's the connect stage, then there's the collaborate stage, and then the support stage. So it's always about working in partnership with whoever we're working with, whether it's with young people or with parents or with other stakeholders. So first of all, it's really important to remember that it starts with us. Our calm sets the tone, because when we talked about neuroception, remember back then, that if a parent senses that we are becoming dysregulated, that we're in a kind of survival mode, then that will impact their sense of flight as well, or fight, or their survival mode as well. So it's really important that we remember that as professionals, it's our job as much as possible to stay calm and to use our own self-regulation strategies to stay calm in the moment and to hold that professional space. Now, that requires a lot of training to do that. It's not just something you can go walk away from this training today and be like, oh, da-da, suddenly I'm going to be able to do it. But I'm going to show you the main principles of that today. But please remember when I'm saying these things that in order to develop these skills, one needs supervision over many months in order to develop these skills. It's not just something you can switch on. So the first is about connect. Okay, so we talked about connect, collaborate, support. The first stage is about connect. Now, connection in terms of connecting with the individual, building that relationship, but also the power of empathy in connecting the prefrontal cortex and getting that prefrontal cortex back online. Remember, I said it takes about 20 minutes to get that prefrontal cortex back online. We can speed that up if we show someone empathy. So what happens is that empathy soothes the amygdala. It's kind of like a calming balm, as it were, to the amygdala that helps the prefrontal cortex come back online. Because what empathy does is it speaks directly to the amygdala saying, well done for keeping this person safe. What you're feeling is valid, but that person is now safe. And we can let that prefrontal cortex come back online. That's what empathy does. It's a really fantastic tool for educators to use. And psychologists, again, have literally years worth of training in how to be empathetic and all the ongoing supervision that they get. So it's not something we can just suddenly, it's not something you either have or don't have. It's something you can train and develop. So I'd like to know, what is your understanding of empathy? Let's just get into the definition. What is empathy? This is a tricky one. Not many of us have been taught what it is or have had training. So empathy is hearing and understanding. It is partly that. Yes, it is partly that. It's active listening and rephrasing. Yes, that's partly it. Yes, that is partly it. Appreciating what they're feeling and the way they're feeling. To some degree, yes. But here's the one in the middle here is a good one. We've got being able to feel what the other person is feeling and sharing that feeling with someone else, putting yourself in somebody else's shoes. Okay. And I think that's really, really important. So this one, showing parents that you understand their point of view while still getting your concerns across. Now, the amygdala is very sensitive. And if it thinks that you have another agenda apart from empathy, it is not going to let that prefrontal cortex back online. So it's really important that empathy sits alone in a little silo, okay, when we're using it. Really, really important. So empathy is feeling with someone. So feeling that emotion with someone and connecting with them on that emotional level. But sympathy is when we feel for someone. It's very top down. It's very judgmental. Sympathy is like, oh, poor you. I'm so sorry that happened to you. But you're disconnecting yourself. You're distancing yourself from the emotion. Whereas empathy is where you cognitively connect with them on an emotional level. And there are 3 steps to empathy. The first one is to recognize the emotion. So just recognizing that there's emotion involved and naming that emotion is really important. Then acknowledging that it feels hard, and then validating the fact that it's absolutely fine to have that emotional response. So let's just jump into these different stages. And remember, when it takes literally years to get really good at empathy. So I'm not expecting you to be amazing at this straight away, but this is a really great framework to get you started on this. So the first part of recognizing, in fact, all of these things is do lots of thinking. So this involves a lot of thinking on our side. So again, we need to have our prefrontal cortexes really well engaged. We can't be in our flip-lid state in order to do this. We have to be calm. Okay. So we need to think about what happened. So what actually happened right now? Okay. Recognize the emotion that the parent's feeling. I'm seeing signs of frustration. You seem really angry, not in a judgmental way, but just in a really concerned way. Okay, so we think about those 2 things, and then we get on to saying, I'm seeing signs, or you seem really angry, etc. Then acknowledging their pain, okay? Because all of these difficult emotions are painful. And if they are dysregulated, it feels painful for that to happen. So you acknowledge their pain cognitively first, connect with something inside you which knows that feeling. So remember back to something that happened to you that was similar. And then you can just say very simply, I know how hard it can be. That's really tough, or it's really hard. Okay, it doesn't need to be many words. Again, the amygdala doesn't need to hear lots of words. The more words it hears, the more likely it is to be like, aha, you're being disingenuous, and to not allow the prefrontal cortex to come back online. And finally, it's about validating. So the first step is for us to remember that all emotions are valid, okay? Even if it's really frustrating for you that this parent is feeling this emotion, it's valid that they're feeling that emotion. They are the parent of that child, and their emotional responses are valid, okay? Their behavior is different, right? You're not validating the behavior, only the emotion that they're having. So you've got to separate the 2 out there, and often we conflate the 2, but we have to separate them out. And then it's about saying it's only natural to feel that way. Of course you feel that way. You're validating the feelings, but not the behavior. Okay, really important. And after we've done that, it's really important to hold our boundary, but we mustn't say but, okay? Because what happens is as soon as we say but, or however, or any other synonyms of but, is that the amygdala is like, aha, I knew you were being disingenuous. It's constantly on the lookout for that, okay? So avoid it, but just state facts. So you say all of those things before, and then you'd say it's important for whatever it is that this happens. Our rules are here to keep children safe, so we need to be consistent. The knock-on effects of this could be tricky because it's really important that you have boundaries. Schools need to have boundaries in order to keep people safe. That's absolutely essential, but we are emotional beings, and we've got to be able to recognize that. And then finally, it's about giving it time. Remember, it takes 20 minutes for that prefrontal cortex to come back online. So if you've got time, you might offer them a drink and have a little chat for a bit and just help them to regulate. You may just let them talk more on it until you can see from their physicality that they have relaxed into themselves and feeling more safe, and just listen to them and actively listen to what they have to say. But if you don't have the time, which is often the case in the school, you just say, oh, thank you so much for bringing that to my attention. I'll have a think about it and I'll get back to you. Okay. That again, the amygdala feels heard, and it gives you space and time to do that. And then you can have another meeting later when hopefully they'll come in a more rational mindset. So I would like you to have a think about using the steps that we had before. So let me just recap over them for you. So we've got recognize, acknowledge, validate, then hold your boundary, and then give it time. I would like you to imagine that a parent has come to you with a concern about another child's behavior. Okay, so they've come to you complaining about another child's behavior. Imagine the kind of emotional state that they might be in. and I want you to compose an empathetic response to them, please. This is difficult, okay? So be kind to yourself about that, but give it a go for me, please. Let's see what we come up with. Remember, this is completely confidential, so no one's going to be able to see your responses. I hear you. That must be hard for you. Now, when we say something is hard for someone, that's sympathy. All right. So that is not empathy there. I apologize to whoever's written that up there. You were very wonderful at being first. But I hear you, and you'd say that's really hard, and just leave it like that. Not for you. Leave the for you out. Thank you for bringing this to my attention. I wasn't aware, but I'm open to discuss how we can find a solution. Okay, that doesn't recognize any of the emotion there. All right. I see. I understand your point. I'll check on it and get back to you. Again, not recognizing the emotion there. That kind of behavior is concerning. I appreciate why you feel upset to some extent. Yeah, we can see that we're getting upset. I'm sorry that this has happened, and I want you to know that we'll take safety very seriously. We'll look into it and get back to you. Again, not empathetic. I understand how you must be feeling. This is terrible. Let me see what has first happened and try my best to make sure that will not happen again. Now, this one, it's not empathy because you're not saying how they're feeling. You're saying that the thing that happened was terrible. Well, you don't know that the thing that happened was terrible. Their emotional response is really hard, but you don't know that the thing that happened was terrible. So be careful there. I'm sorry this has been upsetting for your child. Thank you for telling. Again, you're not recognizing the emotion. We need to name the emotion. So thank you for letting me know. I'll look into the situation. Again, not naming the emotion. Let's try and name this emotion. So here we go. We've got one that's naming an emotion here. If I were you, I'd definitely be very angry too, to some extent. But I think you're kind of just reinforcing the behavior there. So remember, we've got to start off by recognizing the emotion. So I can sense that you're really angry about that. It's really hard when things like this happen for your child. It's totally valid that you feel that way. Give me a few days and I'll find out some more information and I'll come back to you, or a few hours, or whatever it is. That's the kind of empathetic response that we're looking at. Again, we're not naming the emotion. We're saying upset, which is kind of quite general. So angry, I can see, yeah. Yeah, but upsetting can be a bit general again. Okay, so I think this is just really showing us how hard this is to do right. Okay, and that is correct, because you haven't had training in this, and the training that we offer at Connections in Mind is a 6-week course which helps you to do this as part of that course. But you need to practice it and have supervision. So you need to have someone like myself that you can come to and say, I tried the empathy and it didn't work. And then you can dissect that together and work out why it didn't work and come back to it again. But it's really important that we name that emotion. And I know I can see that we're finding that really difficult in this cohort. And that's understandable, absolutely. But we can train you to do that. Absolutely. Okay. So empathy is a powerful tool. There are 3 steps to empathy: to recognize, acknowledge, and validate. Empathies and boundaries can coexist, and it takes time for a parent to regulate. So now we're moving on to collaborate. Okay, so we've done connect, we've done the empathy piece, but then we need to work with the parents to find solutions. They will be much more amenable if we can, instead of coming with strategies that we want to look at, that we can ask them questions. So again, we need to be collaborating with them. So using questions is a really powerful way to bring that prefrontal cortex back online, or keep it online, because we're asking the opinion of the person who is struggling with the emotional response. And it can build that sense of ownership of the parent, that they feel in control of the situation because they have been consulted and they have been offered some action steps. And to do this, we need coaching skills. And this is what we train people in: coaching skills to help to support these types of relationships. And then finally, it's about support. Now, parents need to feel empowered in their environment. They need to feel a sense of autonomy over their child's future. So we need to, as schools, make sure we give them jurisdiction to take action in some areas, some controlled areas. And that's why traditionally British schools have always had parent-teacher associations, and I think culturally, like lots of different cultures have different setups for that, but parents are involved in a particular area of the school that makes them feel empowered. That's really essential. Without that, you get a lot of discontent and nowhere to channel that discontent. But also, it's really important that we support parent well-being too. Now, you have these incredible school settings, right, which have large halls and wonderful facilities. So use them to run yoga classes, exercise groups, choirs, and socials, and all these things that build those strong executive functions. And I'm just going to go back to this, this one here. Where is it? It's hiding up here somewhere. There we are. These building blocks, because when we build these building blocks, then we help build those executive functions, that prefrontal cortex, but also we build the community within our school as well. And that's essential for keeping parents in partnership. So the more time we can invest in building those relationships with parents, the fewer challenges we will have, because they will feel supported and they won't feel they need to flip their lids, because their amygdala will be getting lots of messages from the school that it's a safe place, that they're valued and supported and understood. And that is essential for that parent partnership, for that collaboration. So just thinking on now, well, just summarizing what we've learned today. So it's all about connecting, and that's that empathy, which is clearly a skill that we really need to develop. And as I say, this takes many, many months to develop. This is not something that you can come to a 1-hour training and suddenly switch on like that. It takes time. Then you have to collaborate, work with parents alongside them, bring them into concert with you, into that partnership is so essential. And it's so foundational for young people too. And then supporting them as part of their community and making sure that everyone together is getting the support from the school. It's not just the children that we are developing, but we're also developing the parents and the family relationship, and all of that is really essential to that child's development. Please also remember that we are here to help. We are a community interest company, a non-profit organisation, and we are here to serve primarily our neurodivergent community, but also all children everywhere that are struggling with these things. And of course, their parents come into that too. In our services, we offer executive function coach training. So this is neuroscientific coach training. It's not your normal coaching. It is with that neuroscience lens, what we've been talking about today, about the prefrontal cortex and the amygdala and all of that stuff, and looking at concepts like interoception, which are our ability to read our body's signals, and all sorts of things that you wouldn't get in normal coach training. And then we have our neurodiversity talks and training. So we talk about neurodiversity. We also talk about parent partnerships, etc., as you can see today. And we offer executive function coaching. So if you think you might need some support in these areas, you can get coaching, and you can also get admin support as well. So we offer specially trained admin support to help with executive function challenges. So I just want to look quickly at the executive function coaching. So it's a 6-week course, our level 1 course. We have a course actually starting in February, but I think it's not necessarily at the APAC kind of time zone. The next one will be in May for the APAC time zone. We cover coaching skills, but also the neuroscience and executive functioning, how to use that contact time effectively, how to develop growth mindset in parents and children, flexibility and adaptability in the way that we work, building relationships with stakeholders, reflective practice, supervision and development, the use of technology to support practice, and then boundaries, client protection, and of course, safeguarding, which is essential. And we are one of the training providers for an organisation called the International Executive Function Coaching Certification, which was launched this year. And there are 4 levels of certification. So you can learn how to be an executive function coach, and then you get level 1. Then you can have a certificate of competence that you are a competent and certified executive function coach, that we have seen evidence at this organization that you're practicing to a high standard. Then we have level 3, which is an executive function coach supervisor, so that you can supervise others and hold those reflective practice sessions and work on helping other people to develop empathy. And then finally, level 4, the certified executive function coach trainer, where you can learn to train people within your community in executive function coaching too. Here's a little QR code to become a certified executive function coach. So if you're interested in learning more, you can just scan that QR code there. I will put a link in the chat in a moment as well. And also, if you're interested in reading my book, which has all sorts of neuroscience nuggets in there, especially around parent partnerships, but also in terms of how we help support all of the wonderful young people in our classes, then you can pre-order my book, which comes out on the 13th of August. So please do scan there to pre-order. And then finally, there's just a bit of a feedback form for me. So if you wouldn't mind filling out this feedback form, I'll leave this open while I stop sharing and we go on to the Q&A. Please do fill out the feedback form for me. It tells me about how much you've learned today, how valuable you found it, and also gives you a chance to leave your email address so that I can get in contact with you with more information and further training on working with parents in partnership. Thank you so much.
Victoria, thank you so much. I think we could probably be here for days asking questions. I think even just, I obviously watching even just that empathy section of, how would we, phrase that, sort of response to parents. And it's so tricky to say the right thing without, offending, triggering them. Every parent's different as well. It's so complex. And then, of course, add in that when you're in international schools, you have, teaching staff from all around the world. Everyone has a different, way of expressing, emotions and feelings. It's really, really difficult. And I think just by seeing those responses, which were incredible responses, actually just the little nuances of like, if you say that word, but potentially this is where this conversation is going to go, and actually where you want to steer it is this way, to sort of get the desired outcome. And it's not the desired outcome for you as an educator, it's the desired outcome for everybody, because we're all working together to essentially, support these children, these students. That's the goal. That's what we're here for. We're all trying to work together. And I think it there becomes that friction, and it's not us against them and vice versa. We are trying to work as a whole community to support students. But more importantly, I would love to see some questions in the question box. Please do feel free to just type some questions. I will read out if you've got anything going. Let's have a look. Oh.
I'm just getting rid of some of the ones that people were putting the Q&A ones there.
Yes.
So I just wanted to make sure we got rid of those ones. But
yeah,
please do pop your questions into the Q&A. I'll be delighted to answer any questions that you have. I'm sure it's quite overwhelming having been through this and a different way of thinking about things. But please feel free. I particularly like challenge questions as well, because I love to be put on the spot. So please do ask any questions. How can we feel what the other person is feeling? That is such a great question. Okay, so this is a professional skill. Okay, it's to be able to read the tone of somebody's voice, their body language, to imagine if I was saying or behaving in that way, if I was saying those things or behaving in that way, how would I be feeling? Okay, so that is a skill to be able to do that. But we have to practice it. Okay, so just practice it when you're at the dinner table with your family. Try and be thinking about what emotions are they feeling, and then you can start kind of picking up on these things and looking out for people who maybe you're in a supermarket and you see someone who has who's shouting at the checkout person because something's gone wrong, and you can start thinking, oh, what emotions might be feeling there. And so just checking in with that and beginning to understand. So thank you so much for that. how do we get a copy of these slides? So everyone who has put on the feedback form, their email address will get emailed, and we can supply a copy of the slides for that. Okay.
Oh, I like this one, Victoria. Do you have this is a good one, almost like a sort of a cheat sheet. Do you have any reliable sentence stems to use to show empathy? That's great. That's a really good question. And
Yes,
hopefully you have some
absolutely,
answers.
I do. Yes, so there were some on there. Absolutely, there was some on there, and then I can send some links around as well to. We have like a script for empathy
Mm.
that yeah, a parent script that educators can follow as well. Yes. Um, the EF training, Vicky. So yeah, we offer all sorts of different training. We're a training organization. So the coach training can be offered. We can do a bespoke training for your school setting, where we can either attend your school or we can the training itself is done normally online. It's a hybrid course. So we can do that. In terms of we do also offer something called neuro inclusive classroom practice as well, which is more kind of student facing work, but those we do look at empathy there as part of that training, and that is more for like a whole school approach, and again there are 4 levels of professional development there. You've got your entry level, your competence status, your supervisor, and your trainer as well. So that's really helpful. Cool. Sometimes validating parents' feelings is not enough for them. No, sometimes it's not. You've got to take action off the back of that. But what you can't do is you can't collaboratively work with them when they're in their flipped lid state, right? You're only going to be working with their amygdala, not their rational whole brain. So you've got to allow them to be validated and to regulate again, and then come at that conversation when they're in their whole brain state where they can think through. So either regulating with them and giving that time for them to regulate by listening to what they have to say and helping them get back to calm, or just scheduling another meeting for later when they're more rational, or discussing it on email or something like that.
I like
Okay.
this one, Victoria. Should a teacher be available 24/7? I remember when I was a very young, newly qualified teacher, and you had your school email address. I had one particular parent. Oh, still gets me to this day. I'm sure you know how it feels. And I would just wait until every morning there would be another email about something that the student came home and said, and it generally was the parent had a problem and actually sort of had to be spoken to by the school. But it was a daily basis. I know that in some schools they allow sort of WhatsApp parent groups, WeChat, big thing in China, which I think this is a whole other safeguarding issue in terms of communication where you are with parents as well. Whole other topic. But what would you say about that kind of being available to parents, but also this sort of email and sort of online availability?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I mean, obviously we shouldn't be available 24/7.
Yes.
We need to have professional boundaries. It's absolutely essential. And I think with parents like that who are emotionally quite volatile and maybe we might say they're a bit needy, but actually they're really seeking out that validation a lot. We need to be even more boundaried with them. So just being really clear, having like an out of office response, out of your working time, saying that when you're going to get back to them. That's very standard practice with psychologists and people who are working with people who are at high risk, is to have that and to signpost someone, to other support should they need it, is best practice. But please do not be responding 24/7. Absolutely not. And the more that we hold those boundaries, the more safe that parent will feel. If we're constantly responding to them in the moment, that will escalate things because they'll think that we think that it's really important too. And it kind of feeds the fire. So in terms of kind of emailing and those kind of communications, there's a reason why the professional code of conduct say don't give your personal phone number, don't give your personal contact details, don't engage with parents on social media, all of that, because it's really important. So those boundaries are essential. Absolutely. Thank you, Daisy, for that lovely message about the interactive, insightful session. That's great. Julie, I wonder if Stephanie, if we can repost the link for the Menti again, because Julie just wants to drop her email address
Yeah.
in the feedback form. I'm not quite sure. I can find the chat.
See if I can.
Okay.
just quickly do that for you. But what we'll do, everybody, is I will set from TeachUp. We'll send a sort of a follow-up email to you. We'll send certificates of participation. I will obviously share Victoria's contact details, so you can contact her should you wish to do any training with Victoria, and the link to the webinar that we will obviously then sort of edit and make all lovely and pretty, and cut out the ums and ahs. So you'll have everything basically in a follow-up email. I'll just post that link there for you, Julie. Lovely to see someone from New Zealand. I'm in Sydney right now, so we've got a wonderful time zone between Victoria and myself. Let's have a look. Should we do? Let's do one more, Victoria. Let's just do how to handle overprotective or nagging parents in a healthy way.
Okay, so this is a really important one. So it's exactly the same situation, because if someone is like overprotective, again, they're in that survival response. They are dysregulated, they're worried about their child, and they're not thinking rationally. And then they'll get into those kind of nagging behaviors. So it's exactly the same approach. We need to empathize with them that it is scary raising a child. Like, you've got so much responsibility. That is okay to feel scared and to feel worried and to feel anxious if that's what they're feeling, that the school is here to support them, that you are specialists in education and you are doing your best by that child is really important. But don't put those two things in the same sentence, because that's going to affect the amygdala, is going to head off in that way again. So just listening to them and saying, I can hear that you're really anxious. It's totally understandable that you're anxious. You're raising a child and that's really, really difficult. And then you can hold that boundary and just say, yeah, it's really important that you give us some space to, well, give us a space would really wouldn't work, but it's really important that we work together to support your child, would be the way to say it. And again, see, look, I've been doing this work for 10 years and still I make mistakes in it, because it's really hard. This is not the way that we were naturally brought up to interact with people. And so we often go back to those old ways of being, perhaps the way that we were parented or spoken to by teachers. But actually, we now know from the neuroscience and neuropsychology that that wasn't necessarily helpful. In fact, that's why we have such a problem internationally with mental health problems right now, is because of the way that we interact with each other around these things. Speaking about our emotions and talking about our human experience is what helps us to be more healthy in our mental health, and to not interact with people in these defensive and avoidant ways. Super.
Wonderful. Well, Victoria, thank you so much. I think, there's so much we can talk about. And actually, Victoria is very kindly joining us for a second webinar on the 24th of February, and that's about psychological safety in international schools. So we're discussing what teachers need to know about stress, safety, and the developing brain. So, discussing core safeguarding responsibilities, helping teachers recognise stress responses. So it kind of adds onto this, looking sort of deep of kind of how we sort of these problems arise in the first place, I suppose, to sort of get to that point where, then you've got, difficult conversations with parents. So I will also post that link in the follow-up email for you. So please do join us again. And please also feel free to contact Victoria. You can ask us some more tricky questions.
Please do. I love a tricky question.
Yeah. But it's fascinating, and I think, as I said, Victoria and I, are both educators ourselves, and it's such a sensitive topic, as I mentioned in the start, and here's my empathy. Am I saying this right? I feel for you. I understand what you're going through, because I've been through it myself. And it's a tough one. And I think, the takeaway from this also is, if for you to do the best that you can in terms of engaging with those parents, but also, I would also love to see that, leadership in your schools, which I'm sure you're probably all nodding, fully have your support as well as part of the team. So on that note, I will say good night from Sydney, and that's a good morning from Australia, good morning from the UK for Victoria. And hopefully we'll see you all very, very soon on our next webinar. Thanks, Victoria. Take care. Bye-bye.